For the day. Mr. Schmid, you got the floor.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender. Ich bedanke mich herzlich für die Einladung. Ich habe mit
Thank you very much for the invitation. I talked to Mr. Coelho about the research and the results, and I am just going to stick to that I've had experience with. Now he understands all of the details himself. Now, just on the procedure, there's a difference with Echelon, with Prism and Tempora. We had the documents. It wasn't the same detective work that was necessary. Nevertheless, there is still work to understand the exact details. When you look at the files, the data that Snowden made public, you need to really sit down and look at that to understand the terms. They're not necessarily that easy to understand. So the end of the process, it's very important to understand exactly what this system is capable of, and only when you can fully understand it can you politically evaluate it and draw conclusions from that. So it's very important to put that effort in and to really understand the full capabilities of the system. Second, and I say this from experience, it's very important in terms of the report to do this work very seriously. It's important to look at all the data carefully that you're putting in the report, to check the sources, to check the plausibility, where this information comes from. That is going to really improve the quality of your report. Just a recommendation when it comes to the work, I think you have up until December that at a coordinator level you come to an agreement about what you want to work on in terms of content, so that there isn't suddenly a disagreement about how to proceed. This would be counterproductive, and you'd lose valuable time that you don't have. I would also say it's very useful to use the expertise from the American Congress, from the British Parliament, for example. They have excellent material related to the information that you are now looking into. Secondly, what needs to be clarified now? The echelon study that I have experienced showed the wide scope of what an intelligence service does. What's technically possible, what's finance, what's in the interests of the country, and what's legally allowable. Now, we don't know what they do that's outside of the law, but if you look in a lot of detail about what the legal what's legally allowed for an intelligence service, that's very interesting to look at. That can be very helpful. Secondly, I would also advise you to take the necessary time to understand the technical process. So with the communications, surveillance, how this is actually done, the machines that are necessary, that are used by the intelligence services. These can be technology companies who make this, who put this on the market. There are also companies who are active in other areas who carry out data mining, and they could. It might also be very useful to invite such a company to explain everything that can be done around data mining. Third area that wasn't a problem at the time but is now, the NSA now has outsourced a lot to private companies, around 70%. So it's not just within the NSA itself anymore. Clearly, that is something I think we can see in the Snowden case, the consequences for the security. So even their own, even the phones that they use is outsourced. So some of this is, as I said, in the hands of private companies, and this can lead to problems. So that's something else you should look at in terms of the report. Now, who can be helpful based on our experience? Governments, I think, won't have much interest in helping you. That was certainly our experience at the time. You might not always hear the truth. We were lied to from the American and British sides as to this agreement they had, this cooperation they had, and of course there was this agreement. If you look at national parliaments, you will see that they're not necessarily willing to share their work, and they don't necessarily want someone from the EU there either. So these are all things that you have to bear in mind if you want to invite an oversight committee, for example. Investigative journalists can be extremely helpful to give you tips here. But it's also, as I said, important to look at the sources and the plausibility. There are two types of investigative journalists: those who are truly investigative journalists and those who are creative journalists, shall I say. So there are those who are more interested in just selling a story than in the truth behind the story. So I'm simply saying, take everything with a pinch of salt. Don't take everything on face value. You need to check this yourself. The next issue is security within the EU institutions. We've heard that the Washington representation has been bugged. Countries don't have friends, they have interests. So that's what we need to remember. For us, it's very important. And even back then, we criticized the lack of counter spying measures that we had within the EU. We don't even have the countermeasures a big company would have in place. So I'm talking about the Commission, about the Council. I don't think it's acceptable that the EU representation in Washington doesn't have a proper secure room. Other embassies have that because you know that you might be spied upon even amongst so-called friends. It's also important to look at certain issues and if they're in line with EU law, looking at national legislation, what can be used as safeguards. Now, when I had sent an email, for example, from one country to another country, it was over the shortest distance. But today, you don't know exactly where this data packet goes. It could go via America or go via China for economic reasons. But you can put national legislation in place to say that national legislation has to go through national channels. And this, in this particular case, that could be something that's useful. Secondly, those on a flat rate. If you have a flat rate, you need to be aware when you look at your data and how that is processed and how that's used. Now, this can be outsourced to American companies, for example, and then they have the right to look at this metadata. So you have to look very carefully at the billing and to see if you can what's happening with the processing of the data and if that's going out of the country. And if you're going outside of the EU, then you're going to have problems. Thank you very much for your attention and apologies for having to leave you.
Vielen Dank, unser ehemaliger Kollege